So usually we want to look at two things. Number one, is it because there's a huge significant volume of foreign purchases into the residential market that caused this spike in the ABSD action from our policymakers? Or is it because of the speed of acceleration of the pricing on this end? So two parts, acceleration of price or volume of transactions. Usually when we look at this, we can have a better understanding. So what has happened was that in fourth quarter 2022, non-landed rose by only 0.3%, but in quarter one, it rose by 2.5%. Now, the larger increment, I would say, would be a landed property, 0.6% to 5.7%. And then when we look at this, in totality, basically, 2022 Q2, 3.6% increment in condos and apartment. 2022 Q3, 4.4%, and then 2022 Q4, 0.3%. Now, I would say that Q4 was a very different season because 2022 Q4 last year, that was the entire period of revenge traveling because everything opened up. A lot of people traveled. Perhaps that has caused a dip in transaction volume. That has, of course, resulted in the fact that there was not much significant change. But maybe underlying this quarter one of 2023, there was some data that our policymakers have that has then resulted in them wanting to take this particular action because I'm not sure, maybe they have the data on the influx of liquidity or the number of interest from foreign buyers into our residential market and forecasting this with the very backdrop that our personal opinion is that our condos and apartments supply is actually in a very undersupply situation, even though we have 47 new launches this year, which resulted in about 10,000 number of new units being introduced. But the totality of our supply is still at 340 to 350,000 units. And if we were to, of course, look at the transaction, so when we look at acceleration, it's very clear. If you look at the flash estimate here, from URA, the plateau was Q4 2022, and then there was a sharp acceleration back to Q1 2023. And if this were to go on, what's going to happen to our private property price index is that it will then continue in an upward trend to end up with 2023. If every quarter is 3 to 4%, we'll end up with about 12 to 16% by the end of 2023. What would this then mean? If, let's say, local Singaporeans will have the aspiration to want to move up to a condo or apartment or even a landed property, would this then be something that Singaporeans will be priced out? I think if we look at the statement being released by our policymakers, they feel that have to take this equation out of the picture because it seems that underlying demand from Singaporeans ourselves is already very strong. And if we do not do anything to the foreigners, investors' demand into the residential market, these two components being added together is going to create an even faster acceleration. So perhaps by taking this equation out, it can then, of course, allow the local demand to take shape itself, even though I believe it will still have an increment, but perhaps it will not be at a 3% rate, maybe at a 1% or maybe 0.something% rate. And perhaps that's what policymakers are looking at. Now, let's go to the second chunk that I was talking about. First chunk, we look at acceleration. Now, let's look at the percentages and the quantity of transaction Q1 2023 by nationality. If I were to go to real list, I look at 2022 April. So over a 12 months period, 2022 April, 2023 April, I look at all regions in Singapore. I look at all nationality and residential status, apartments and condos for new launch, resale and sub-sale. These are the numbers that we're looking at. So you can see that there was a sharp rise in the company level buying residential properties. Now, what are these company level? Take note, for a company to buy, firstly, you do not have leverage power because in terms of LTV loan, you can only take a 10% loan. When you talk about company level, the only people with buying power right now, of course, if let's say a Singapore company were to use their company to buy residential property, of course they can do that, but they have to pay a ABSD of 35% if they are an entity. Largely, though we don't have data, it's quite obvious that this 944 belongs to family offices, very likely, because family offices, they have the purchasing power. And of course, what do we mean by family offices? It means that foreign investors, they come in, they set up family office, they use this entity to purchase a residential property. So over the whole 12 months period, 944 transactions were done by companies, very likely family offices. They have bite the bullet and paid 35% ABSD on top of that 4 to 5% buyer's stamp duty. That means in totality, the tax that they pay is about 40%, and now it's being revised to 65%. Secondly, foreigners' quantity of transactions over the past 12 months, there were 321 China foreign investors that bought in, 1,108 PRs, and of course, is this round of ABSD being targeted at PRs? Not so, because for PRs, the first purchase is still at 5%. Singaporeans' first purchase is still at 0%. So we know that it's being targeted at foreign investors as well as company level, because if not, our government wouldn't have included entities and trustee, and they have a similar doubling effect. Of course, there's also a slight change plus about 3% for Singapore's second property. Hopefully that can curb a little bit. And third property, 5% increment. PR, of course, has a 5% change, but first property is not affected. This means that the focus is still on the fact that our policymakers will want the private property market to be largely for primary residence. That means for your own stay, your own use, your own consumption, and to curb investment demand.